He's a graduate of Bayonne High School in Bayonne, New Jersey, where he was born. He graduated from Harvard College in 1962 and continued graduate studies at Harvard and was a teaching fellow in government. In 1964, he participated in Freedom Summer in Mississippi, as did many other Jewish students his age, including Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman, who were killed that summer in Mississippi, along with James Chaney, because they, like Barney Frank, were helping African Americans register to vote. Barney Frank arrived in Mississippi before the murders of 3 of his co-workers, and he stayed after they were murdered. The world knew it took courage to go to Mississippi that summer as a freedom rider, and after those murders, the world knew how much courage it took. Barney Frank had that courage. I first heard him speak as a guest lecturer at Harvard in a course taught by the renowned sociologist Nathan Glazer called Urban Social Policy. Barney Frank was then a top aide to Boston Mayor Kevin White. Barney Frank was by far the fastest talking lecturer I heard in my college career, and one of the most compelling. He went on to serve on the staff of Congressman Michael Harrington before getting elected to the Massachusetts state legislature. He picked up a law degree from Harvard Law School while he was a state legislator. And then in 1980, when Ronald Reagan won the presidency, Barney Frank was first elected to Congress. He served 32 years in the House of Representatives, and every day of those 32 years, he was the smartest guy in the building. He was not always the most effective. You need 3 things to be an effective, accomplished member of the House. 2 of them simply take time: experience and seniority. The other requires a certain amount of luck. Your party must be in the majority. You saw what Barney Frank could do with experience, seniority, and his party being in the majority when he was chairman of the House Financial Services Committee.
Why do you need bonuses? Can't we just give you a good salary, or give yourselves a good salary, you're in charge of that, and do the job? This notion that you need some special incentive to do the right thing troubles people. Anyone who wants to answer, please go ahead.
I'll try, Mr. Chairman. It's a good question, and it's complicated.
And when he wrestled the Dodd-Frank bank reform bill through the House of Representatives, you also saw him get through something that many people thought was impossible. Last week, after Barney Frank said he would like to be the temporary appointed senator from Massachusetts when John Kerry becomes Secretary of State, a former chief of staff to Governor Deval Patrick tweeted, "I respect Congressman Frank and what he has accomplished, but there are better options for Massachusetts Senate interim appointment." We asked that former chief of staff who he thought the better options are. He gave us the names of 3 women: a former president of MIT who is currently on the board of General Electric and Qualcomm, a retired Massachusetts Supreme Court justice, and a Bank of America executive. He also gave us the name of a man who is the head of the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation. In other words, no one with any idea how the United States Congress, and specifically the United States Senate, actually works. The governor's former chief of staff, who clearly doesn't know how Congress or the Senate really works, then told the Boston Globe, quote, "The theory that we have to send experienced people to Washington to break the gridlock, the experienced people are the ones creating the gridlock." Now, I know that the greatest governor of all time does not believe that, but he did once employ the abject buffoon who, in that statement, just accused Ted Kennedy and John Kerry and Ed Markey and Barney Frank, who each served Massachusetts for decades. He has accused them of creating the gridlock. Of course, the only Republicans that guy has ever met are Massachusetts Republicans, so he has no idea what it is like to serve in a Senate with Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, and a House of Representatives with Michelle Bachmann and Allen West. For a senator who will serve for over 100 days during critical budget negotiations over the future of Medicare and Social Security, Massachusetts will not be well served by a retired judge or a bank executive or a former university president who has to leave her corporate boards and engage in a speed study of subjects she knows now nothing about. The Honorable Barney Frank is ready to serve. He has been trained to serve. He knows the subjects better than most senators will ever know the subjects, and Massachusetts will be lucky if he does serve as their next appointed senator, which he will, if the greatest governor of all time does the right thing. Joining me now, former Democratic Congressman, the Honorable Barney Frank of Massachusetts. Thanks for joining me tonight, Congressman.
Thank you for the very generous words, Lawrence.
I have made the case that there is nothing more important, I think, especially in a temporary appointment like this, at a critical time like this, in these budget negotiations with the sequester coming, nothing more important than experience. It would be stunning to me if the governor would send some, at this point, political tourist of some kind down there for a temporary run.
Well, I agree, although I wouldn't say tourist. And at least one of those people, whom I know very well, former Chief Justice Marshall, frankly, I had been thinking about her in the interim. And my view up until about 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, was that that's the kind of person who will get the appointment. Because, as you know from your experience, the first 3, 4, 5 months of a new Congress, the Senate doesn't do a great deal. And I had no interest after 32 years of fairly intensive work in kind of taking something ceremonial. And I was sitting in the Democratic caucus over that New Year's weekend, and I heard the bill outlined that I voted for, that it was necessary to get things forward and did raise taxes to some extent on wealthy people. I heard what decisions are now going to have to be made in February, March, and April. The fate of Social Security and of Medicare. The Republican effort to use the debt limit, an outrageous, arbitrary effort by them to hold hostage older people and lower income people. The sequester. There's going to be a Republican effort to take the military and hold it harmless so that we can continue to have unnecessary troops in Western Europe and more nuclear weapons than we need, and instead make greater domestic cuts. So I now do believe, experience is important, and it's two kinds. One, it is in how the Senate works. And I was a member of the House. But I spent a lot of time working with senators, including, you mentioned, the financial reform bill. I was the chairman of a 3-week conference, including senators, and worked closely not just with Chris Dodd and others, but with some of the Republicans. And I also have, frankly, been working on these issues. So, yeah, there are other people who are quite good. And as I said, one of them, at least, who was in that list, I hadn't heard it before, Margaret Marshall, the former Chief Justice, an extraordinarily able woman. And I had thought this would be a great thing to do. I just feel a little immodestly, perhaps now, given the fact that this is not going to be a normal Senate. These next 3 months are going to be about as important a set of 3 months as we've had, maybe since the New Deal, because we've compressed these things in there. And that's why I volunteered. And I did have people say, well, you're not supposed to volunteer. And frankly, my view is that's kind of junior high school stuff. The difference between me and a number of other people who want to be the interim senator is that I've said so publicly, and the rest are being coy.
Yeah, and it's a public position, and I think presenting oneself publicly as an option is a crucial part of it. The Progressive Change Campaign Committee has started a PointBarneyFrank.com website. They were highly instrumental and early backers of Elizabeth Warren's candidacy. What I would love to see is that the interim senator be Barney Frank, and that you go into John Kerry's committee assignments so that Massachusetts has a member of the Senate Finance Committee, which is where Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, where all that jurisdiction is, and you know there's going to be tremendous pressure on those programs in the first 2 months, uniquely because of this sequester situation. I mean, you and I are both staring at this first 2 months, 3 months of this Senate session saying this truly is extraordinary that all of their work is front-loaded like this.
Right. No question. And by the way, I'm very proud to say that Elizabeth Warren on Saturday at her ceremonial swearing in Roxbury said very good things about me, and we worked very well together. And I would also want to endorse your view that Ed Markey should be and will be the next senator. Frankly, Ed and I have worked together in Congress before that in the legislature, and I would like to think of this as something of a kind of a relay team. There's the interim, and I would have one difference with you, Lawrence, and I understand the motivations, but I think this two-step process makes sense. That is, I do think it's better to have an election than an appointment to the Senate. You know, Tip O'Neill used to very proudly say that the House of Representatives was the one body where you could not get there unless you won the election. And on the other hand, if you have a 4 or 5 month delay, you go without a vote. So I think the two-step process works well, and I think the rule that whoever is appointed should not be a candidate. It can't be made legal, by the way, you know, because of the Constitution setting the Senate qualifications and not allowing for any modification of them. But given that, as I said, on December 28th, I didn't really want that job. When people asked me, do you want the Senate appointment? I said, you know, it's literally, I've just retired. It's kind of like being told a week before graduation, you got to go to summer school. But I care deeply about Social Security and Medicare. They are the two most successful anti-poverty programs in American history. And to put off Medicare or to deny a full cost of living increase to elderly people living on $1,500, to protect a bloated military budget, and it's bloated not because we have bad people in the military, but because we have put them into situations where they shouldn't be, and instead cut out on environmental or healthcare or education or housing. Those things trouble me deeply, and I literally, as I sat there in the caucus and learned what the decisions were going to be, as you said, extraordinary, important decisions, crammed into a 3-month period. Delay won't be an option because you have these new deadlines. Then I felt really insistent that I wanted to be there to protect things that I care about.
Congressman Frank, and I hope, Senator, to be frank, I would hate to see the governor send someone into that job who's never been in a discussion of change CPI, not at a time like this. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
We'll be back with more right after this.